Hello, my name is Amir, and this is how my childhood changed everything. First of all, I'm a writer, and currently I live in Fremont, California. I've always wanted to be a writer. Ever since I was a young boy, I would read poetry and sometimes my mother's books. Of course, school books as well. I started writing when I was around 12 years old. And in case you didn't know where Fremont is, this is the Golden Gate Bridge, one of the main attractions of Fremont. That's what you probably know it for. But I actually didn't grow up in Fremont. I was born in 1963 in Kabul, Afghanistan. My childhood was mostly pleasant. However, there were many things I didn't understand, or I didn't know. My mother died in childbirth, which was something I always thought about. I would think about what she would look like, what she would think of me, and how she would act. However, my father, Baba, was a legend. Everyone in Kabul knew him because of his wealth and honor. I didn't know it back then, but I would spend most of my life trying to please Baba. Oh, and this guy on the right, this is Hassan, my servant, and son to my father's servant, Ali. Although he's much more than that. He's my best friend, and, well, one of my only friends. Before we keep going, there's something you should know about Hassan, something a little different. What I mean is that him and his father are Shia Muslims, which is why he was discriminated against and looked down upon by most of Kabul, who were Sunni Muslims. This is why in public, he was nothing more to me than a servant. This was so that I could keep honor in my family. Now let's just focus on Baba for a second. He is what everyone would have wanted in an Afghani man. He was 6'5", athletic, a businessman, and honorable. He even gave back to the community by making an orphanage. But even more than that, he was Pashtun, which is another word for a Sunni Muslim. There was one story that I could never get over about Baba. It was said that he once fought a bear with his bare hands. I knew I would never be able to live up to him, and even worse, I'd killed his beloved wife. He was the bear that I had to defeat. But anyways, back to Hassan. He was everything my father would have wanted in me. Strong, courageous, athletic, and well-mannered. While most of the boys like Hassan would play sports or fight, I would read books all day. He could even use a slingshot, which he was deadly accurate with. However, he loved it when I read to him. We would go up behind the house to the pomegranate tree, and I would read him stories all day. He loved them almost as much as he loved me. He would never fail to stand up for me when I was too much of a coward to do so. He would do anything for me. For you, 1,000 times over, he would say. At the time, his loyalty was nothing more than normal, but to this day, I've never met anyone as much of a friend as Hassan was. Yet I never referred to him as a friend. Now when I say that Hassan would always stand up to me, I meant it. Now you're gonna meet Asef, our childhood bully, a Hitler-inspired psychopath who had it out for Hassan for simply being Shia, and even more so for me because I hung out with him. Him and his two followers, Wally and Kamal, who were followers, not even friends, would often pick fights with us, and of course it was always Hassan who would keep them away, with me cowering behind him in fear. These incidents were yet to come to an end. Fast forward to the winter of 1975, where everything changed. We were having one of our famous kite fighting tournaments in Kabul. Hassan and I were a great team. I had nearly won the past tournament. And Hassan, well, he was the best kite runner in all of Kabul. Kite runners were people who would chase after the losing kites after they had been cut, in hopes of keeping one for themselves. Hassan had a way of knowing exactly where a kite would land without even looking. However, this kite tournament was going to be very different. We had gone with Baba into town to get our own kites. He would always make sure to get one for Hassan, even though he didn't fly in the tournament. I knew that if I won this year, Baba would finally stop being disappointed in me, which is exactly what I did. After lasting for hours, the sight of our kite cutting the rope of the only kite left in the sky was the best feeling I had ever experienced. Although, the sight of Baba cheering for me for the first time was the biggest relief of my life. Unfortunately, it was a short-lived happiness. Of course, Hassan offered to run the kite, and once I was done being congratulated by the community, I went out looking for him. I asked this man if he had seen him, and he told me that he'd seen him being chased by someone. I knew at that moment that it was Asef, but I could never have known what would happen next. I came across an alleyway where Wally and Kamal were holding Hassan down, as Asef asked him for the kite. Being the loyal servant that he was, Hassan refused, which led to me sitting behind the wall, frozen in place, as Asef proceeded behind him and removed his pants. While the rest happened, I couldn't come to save him. It must have been out of fear. I just sat there and remembered playing with Hassan and him telling me that he would do anything for me. I had never done anything in my life that had made me feel so guilty. I could never get over the fact that I was too much of a coward to save a boy who would do anything for me. For weeks, I didn't see him. He would just lay in bed and tell his dad that he was sick. I couldn't bear to see him anymore when he eventually did come out. So I put a watch and some money that I had gotten from my unappealing birthday that meant nothing to me anymore. I hid it under his bed, and then I told my father that he had taken it. Somehow, my father forgave him, but Ali was filled with shame, and since he'd grown up with my father, it was very hard for him to leave, but he did. That was the only time I saw my father cry, and it was because of my cowardness and my mistakes, which made it clear that I was never going to be able to live up to my father. Then came the Russians. When they invaded Afghanistan, whatever was left of my father's happiness was taken away. Although he was always disappointed in me, he still cared for me. And for my safety and future, we left everything behind. My father left behind everything he loved, owned, and worked for. And we moved to America. Life in America was very different. We had gone from wealthy to lower class. My dad worked in a gas station to pay the bills, and I attended high school. I think the best part of my teenage years was graduating high school, because it was one of few times that I thought my father might actually be proud of me. It's only one of few times that I can remember my father clapping and cheering for me. We would often go to a flea market to make extra money, which was where I met the love of my life, Soraya. She would find interest in my writing, which I hadn't seen since I had been with Rahim Khan, my father's old friend from Afghanistan. This, of course, led to me asking Baba to respectfully ask for her hand in marriage. Her parents accepted, and before I knew it, I was a married man. We had to skip part of the traditional marriage because Baba had been increasingly sick and was diagnosed with cancer. Shortly after the marriage, Baba died. I now had my own identity to create. However, my past was still lingering in my mind. I couldn't escape my childhood. I published my first book a few years later. I dedicated it to Rahim Khan. He was my mentor. He encouraged me to write when no one else would. He was the father I wish I had had, because he valued poetry more than sports like soccer or anything to do with being a real man. It was Rahim Khan that brought me my miracle. I could finally end my quest for redemption and quit living in the past. All of my guilt and sadness had changed me, and I finally had a chance to leave it all behind. All he said was that there was a way to be good again, but he gave me an opportunity to fix what I had done. So back to Afghanistan I went, back to where my childhood had changed and haunted me and created this quest for redemption that I could finally fulfill. I could finally stand up for myself, for Baba, for Hassan. So back I went, back to where my mistakes had changed everything.